Welcome to the Bestiary, your one-stop shop for monster lore, info, and shenanigans. Join us as we take you through today's special feature.
All right, hello everybody, welcome back to the Bestiary. We are going to be focusing on kobolds today. My name is Morgan, we've got John over here.
Hello!
Tyler up above my head right now.
Hello!
And Rashern, say hello Rashern.
Hello!
Rashern is a fellow streamer, he's a variety streamer on Twitch. He and I will do some co-op every once in a while as our schedules allow. But yeah, kobolds. Rashern, that was your pick, wasn't it?
Yes, the most basic of monsters, because I actually have not played much D&D in my life. I've never been able to because of my schedule in theater and stuff. Actually don't know much about kobolds, and they're interesting. I always thought they were related to goblins, and then I found out that they're not anymore.
Wait, anymore?
Yeah, they changed it.
They did used to be, yes, related to goblins. And the kobolds are a big topic. I mean, they go back to 1974. Is there with one of the very first monsters ever introduced into D&D, along with goblins and orcs and all the usual.
Now, are they one of the ones that came out of the weird Korean toy set?
Well, you know what?
Wait, well, what?
Oh, well, you need to watch more episodes of the Bestiary.
Yeah. We talk about it in our very first podcast.
For those who want that story, go listen to the Owlbear episode. You will get the full scoop. Because kobolds were such a big topic, I decided we could use some help, and I went to a neural net generator and asked it questions about the kobolds just to save us all time on research. And you know, I think it's done a pretty good job of giving little tidbits here and there. For instance, you know, I asked it, "What is a kobold?" and it responded, "Kobolds set traps and infiltrate your inn."
You're in?
That is surprisingly accurate.
Also, it mentions there's a fight outside, which you might want to check out because it's pretty interesting, it says. So
wait, right now? Should we go check?
Apparently right
Morgan,
now.
Morgan, there's a fight outside your house.
Oh my god.
Right now. Kobolds are involved.
They also say that kobolds are one of the earliest and longest running creatures in gaming history. You can tell because they look more like miniature bird animals than humanoid insects, but that's only because they were genetically modified by dung beetles during the Second World War. Then they migrated to Midgard and flourished. But today, kobolds are, without a doubt, the absolute worst. They come from the mind of one of the most prolific artists in the world, the infamous Daryl McCraney.
Daryl McCraney.
So thank you to the neural net generator for saving us all of that work. We can all go home now.
I am saving the name Daryl McCraney.
That's going to be your new kobold character, huh?
For my new kobold character.
Are they still player characters, by the way? That's a question I should ask.
Kobolds. I
might be jumping ahead.
No, kobolds they are player characters once again. Once again, they have been brought back by 5th edition. And actually that's kind of a good segue into this whole episode, I think, because unlike a lot of the creatures we cover where there's a lot of history and a lot of culture and a lot of buildup, and then D&D 5 sort of has the unenviable task of coalescing all of that for a new player base. For kobolds, D&D 5 is actually maybe the best source of knowledge for them. They developed, for having been one of the first creatures of D&D, they developed surprisingly late.
Yeah, I have to agree.
Now, I've seen that they're related to goblins. I've also seen that they're related to dragons at one point in 3rd edition. But this is 5th edition, so.
Yes, in 5th edition, they have fully embraced their Dungeons & Dragons draconic roots. But this actually comes about because of the mythology of kobolds. I know, Morgan, you are kind of a mythology fan. Do you know anything about the mythology of kobolds?
I really don't. I couldn't find anything in legit mythology lore, like ancient mythology lore. I wasn't looking at more recent stuff. But I don't know. They've always been synonymous in my brain with goblins and orcs. Like those three things always were the same thing to me. And I'm not sure how that happened or why. But I know that orcs are definitely their own thing. So.
I found one thing that claimed that the inspiration for kobolds in D&D was initially something from German mythology that's called a kobold, but I could find no corroborating evidence.
I'm curious.
That's actually correct. And I happen to have I happen to have some knowledge of this from my Germanic relatives or heritage. I once owned a children's book that actually had kobolds in them as a monster. I can't remember the name of the book, or I'd share it.
That's
but
kind
awesome.
of along the line of fairy lore that you get in like Irish mythology. Are they kind of like little trickster monster creatures, or?
Very much so. They come about. Basically, there is a whole subset of creatures like gnomes, the Rumpelstiltskins of the world, for instance,
right.
that are kind of these tricksters. You don't know what they're going to do. They're pranksters. They make deals and take your soul and things like that. What's interesting about the kobold is that it develops specifically out of a subsection of that myth, which involved minor spirits. And I don't mean minor as in little, although they are very little. I mean minor as in like guys with pickaxes under the ground digging up minerals. And there were many cultures, especially the Scandinavian Germanic cultures, believed that there were spirits that protected the rocks that were in the earth, especially the valuable ones. And kobolds, or my favorite name for them, comes from Cornwall, which is the knockers, because it was believed that you could, I mean, for the name's great, but it did come from, they believed that you could hear them knock on a mine before it would collapse, which was actually true in the sense that mines often do make these series of booming kind of knocking sounds prior to a collapse, because that is the sound of the mine collapsing further in.
Right.
And it was thought that was spirits warning people to leave before, and so they became the knockers. And kobolds, which is a German kind of old Germanic word that means either, depending on your translator, it means either good house or imp. The good house comes because in Germanic lore, these things came out of the mines and would actually follow people home, and then would become housekeepers.
So brownies.
Brownies, yeah. Maybe a little bit more willing to work with people than brownies.
Okay.
You could keep a kobold in your house by leaving out little like food for it and being kind to it. Interestingly, and this was my favorite fact I found from doing the mythology aspect of this, was they actually named a mineral after kobolds, and that is cobalt. Cobalt, the metal cobalt.
Really?
And not the color cobalt, the metal cobalt.
The metal cobalt, and the reason is because cobalt has high levels of arsenic in it, and by handling it, you can actually get sick and die. And it was believed.
So I shouldn't eat it.
Generally not. I mean, if you find a way, let me know. But kobolds were thought to be creating the poison in retaliation for people stealing their precious metal.
Interesting.
And that is where the name comes from.
Now, is it kobold or kobold? Because you've used both of them.
Well, I've heard it said both ways, which is why I'm kind of like splitting the difference.
Did you not ask the neural net how to pronounce?
Let's see.
How do you pronounce kobold?
I could maybe ask. Let's see. Hold on, I'm putting it in.
AI guys, it's
okay.
We're gonna be out of a job.
So the neural net has returned to me a list, like a bestiary of its own, with several entries. The first entry is kobolds. It says, I played a kobold once. They could have broken me, but they didn't. I didn't want to die. And then later, they brought me to a stinky camp. I also need to read you the next few entries on this bestiary list.
Okay.
Each one is a title and then something about that, or maybe like a little memoir note about it. The next one is Wales. Oh, I did. but I've learned my lesson, and it took years.
Whales. Oh, I did.
The next one is bears. Bears. I did kill a bear once, but they didn't like it, so I never did it again. And last on this list is orcs. Who knows? I just do what I can and get on with my life. Yes, some orc warriors may like to kill me, but I'd rather go out in a blaze of glory than be the first one in line to die.
I don't.
So that answers our question, right? I mean, on how to pronounce it.
Whales.
Whales.
How do you pronounce kobolds? I did once.
I did
Got it.
once.
And I learned my lesson.
It didn't like
Stinky
it,
camps.
and I never did it again. So,
What was my question?
well, your question, to get back to it, was about the what did they start as goblins or dragons?
Oh, yes.
And there is actually they started as goblins, and that is because of this mythology.
So apparently there's different types of kobolds. Like, I'm curious about the aquatic kobold. Because apparently that's a thing.
Well, do you want to take us a little bit, Tyler, to get to that through kind of the history of they start as goblins and then kind of what happens next?
I'm curious if you found reasons why for the change, but yeah, first and second edition. First edition, they have kind of this dog look, and they're described as like lizardy goblinoids. And then second edition, they continue the goblin thing.
And I should say they literally are listed in the first, the basic set before they're even given a proper monster entry. Their only description is they're like goblins, but weaker.
Yeah, I saw that.
Which maybe that's why I always thought that they were the same thing, or nearly so, because they kept describing them as like goblins, but, and so my brain just...
Well, and that's what everybody, like, okay, what are we going to do? As a DM, like, everybody's level 1 or level 2. Like, you're done fighting rats. Are you going to fight 3 goblins or 5 kobolds? And then come third edition, they're like, no, we want a different creature. We don't just want goblin light. And so they start focusing on more of the draconic elements. And third edition, fourth edition is when you start to see kind of the lore expand and we start getting the different versions. Although the the winged kobold has existed since at least second edition, I believe.
It's second edition. The Erd is introduced in 1989. 1989.
Monstrous Manual?
1989 in the Monstrous Manual is the first appearance of the Erd.
Can I ask a question that might be dumb?
No. I mean, yes, you can ask a question, but it won't
no,
be
you
dumb.
may not ask, Rashern.
If it's dumb, we won't answer. We'll just pretend we didn't hear you and we'll move on.
We'll get the neural net to answer.
Related to dragons, do they ever have... Now, I know that many dragonoids don't. Do they have elemental powers like breath, fire breath, or anything like that ever?
Okay, so moving on. We're gonna no. Okay, so yeah. So to answer your, do they have fire breath or things like that? The base. You can correct me if I'm wrong here, Tyler, but I was not able to find any base kobold that is given fire breath or those sort of draconic powers.
No, I feel like the way in which their draconic bloodline represents itself, and the reason I use that phrase is because they show an aptitude towards sorcery. So they don't get breath weapons or, affinities to particular elemental things, but they do. There's an innate sorceress element to kobolds, and that's where you'll find your kobold magic users are going to be sorcery related.
And there's actually an in-game sort of explanation for this, an in-world explanation. Around third edition, you start to see the kobold be developed in terms of its backstory, its culture, all of these things, as you mentioned, and we will get there, I promise. But there's like these new races of kobold, right? The aquatic kobold, the snow kobold, and the question starts to come up for the developers. How did these things spread to be so prolific across the world? What is their true nature? At this point, Wizards of the Coast seems to finally embrace the idea that, like, okay, kobolds are not goblins, they are dragons. But what does that mean then? Where did they come from? Why do they exist? And Ed Greenwood, who created Forgotten Realms, and I forgot who he wrote the book with, but there is a book that he released called The Grand History of the Realms, and it's a pretty insane book. It is literally a timeline, a 257-page timeline, starting in so Forgotten Realms has a calendar that is the Dale reckoning. So dates are always done either DR or minus DR, and DR is the 0, and then, you know, going forward from there. So where we play in the Forgotten Realms today is, I want to say it's the 1490s. We're in modern Dungeons and Dragons, we're in the 1490s after Dale Reckoning. The Grand History of the Realms starts, I want to say, like minus 300,000 DR and takes you up through it, or minus 30,000 at least, and takes you up through every major event in the world. And in this book, you finally get the true origins of the kobold. It begins in minus 24,500 DR. So nearly 25,000 years ago, or more even, the kobolds the dragons are already existing, and they rule the world at this point. They were created by this god Asgaroth, who, depending on who you ask, is the creator of the multiverse. Regardless, a very, very powerful being. And this sickness starts to settle on the dragons. And it's this time that's called like the Rage of the Dragons, or the Age of the Age of Rage, the Age of Rage. So at this time, the kobolds were created through drops of Tiamat's blood, or through.
She bled a lot then.
Yes, it is uncertain as to whether it was a single drop of blood that became the first and most important kobold. And that kobold would have been Kurtulmak, who is now also their god. Or if Kurtulmak made the kobolds out of one of Tiamat's eggs during a very crazy mythological story involving bandits breaking into Tiamat's lair, her crushing them all. Oh,
that story is so good.
It's very good. Do you want to tell it? Do you want to tell that story?
You finish, and then I'll jump into that one.
Okay. Well, sometime after that, Kurtulmak is the first kobold, and he is born of Tiamat, so he is definitely dragonborn. Right. And he spreads his race to grow and grow, and they create a city, which I'm going to do my darndest to pronounce this. It is Dara Strixhurthi, which is the first and last nation of kobolds. After this, the kobolds would never be able to form a nation again. But the kobolds are all living here when the Rage of the Dragon settles in. And a few things are going on at this time. The kobolds are mining in this great, vast, massive subterranean nation they have. And they come across the stones of a particular god, the god of gnomes, Garo Glittergold. And the thing about gnomish stones, these particular stones, is they actually contain the souls of all unborn gnomes. And the kobolds don't care about that. I know there's some
problem.
There's a problem. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They steal them and they run with them. So Garl, of course, swears revenge. At the same time that this is happening, the dragons are the greatest dragon of this age, the most powerful dragon probably to ever live, aside from Tiamat, is names. Kasinthascotch? It's not even gonna try.
Well, that'll be easy to say. It just rolls off the tongue.
We're gonna call him Cassin.
You don't want to go with Scotch?
Cassin, yeah, Scotch works. Scotch the Green. He's a great green dragon, and he loses his mind, and Garl tricks him into turning his attentions to the kobold city. And he falls upon the nation, and he begins to destroy it. Now, 3 really important things come out of this. First of all, Garl makes off with his spirit stones, but the kobolds curse him forever for having destroyed their city. And thus begins a long-standing war between the kobolds and the gnomes, which has other mythological stories wrapped into it. The other thing that happens is Kurtulmak, the kobold god, dies. And this is actually where he becomes a god. Before this, he is just the first, the greatest kobold. This is where he's raised to godhood because he dies defending the city. And that is seen as an act of such heroicness that he is raised up. The third thing that happens is the city was supposed to have been waiting there to warn the city of the attack of the dragons, the potential attack, and carry off people were supposed to be the Urds, these flying kobolds. But the leader of the Urds, a kobold named Karolyek, he becomes a coward and orders the Urds to abandon their post. And they all leave.
Gives them all a middle finger and runs off.
And then comes crawling back later after Kurtulmak is dead and is like, oh, we tried to save the city. We were there, I promise. And that all kind of gets ballsed up when Kurtulmak comes back as a god and is like, yeah, no, I totally know what you did. So to this day, 3 things have come out of that. War for the gnomes, Kurtulmak becomes a god, and finally, Kurolyak and the Urd become, even though they could be more powerful because they can fly. These are kobolds that can fly, and most kobolds can't. They become actually considered sort of outcasts of all of kobold society and are looked down upon for the role they played in the fall of their nation. So all of this came about because of the 3rd edition desire to grow and expand kobold culture and lore.
They have a particularly, one of the most well-detailed ecology articles that we have had on the show in Dragon Magazine 332. It's not one of the more fun ones. There's not a fun frame story about treasure hunters using, mimic acid or anything fun like that. But it's chock full of fun details, and it's got its own version of the similar origin story. I definitely recommend everybody check it out. With it's the version with the bandits attacking Tiamat's lair after she spawns her first clutch of eggs, and they come to try to take advantage of her weakness, and she flips out and destroys the whole cavern around her. And realizing that was kind of a bad move and she's trapped, she forces one of the eggs to hatch early, and that's where Kurtulmak comes from. And he clears out the cavern, realizes that the best way to keep it safe, seeing how he's the only one around, is to start building a bunch of traps, which leads into the kobolds' love of traps,
that's the origin
one
of
of their first things that they did.
And then after that, he starts building this labyrinth of cavernous tunnels and finding more of her eggs and creating more starting to create kobolds to help him build traps and tunnels, which is where their love of big, circuitous, labyrinthian caverns and mining comes from, as well as their love of traps.
And in Dungeons and Dragons lore, some of it is mythology. Like the story Tyler just told is sort of the kobold's own mythology. This is something they tell. They don't know the truth of it. And then the story I told is actually considered history. This is actually recorded in something called the Treatise Historical of the Dragon Tyrants. And it's actually recorded history. So the gods walk the earth, these things actually happened. It's not a world like ours, of course, where, we say, oh, and so was raised to godhood, and we know it's either allegory or metaphor or just plain faith and religion. In this, it's history. This happened. And so to get to this is a long loop back to the question about aquatic kobolds and, snow kobolds and all that. We know that after this history, after their nation was shattered, the kobolds were fractured as a race, and they spread to the far corners of the Forgotten Realms. And there, basically, each one of these races tried to rebuild the Great Society. And so each one thought they were the ones to do this. Each one thought that they were alone in the world because their entire nation had been broken. And so they developed their own way of making it in the world. And their draconic blood kind of expressed itself in this way, in that, if the ones who went to this icy lands, they began to take on, because remember, Tiamat, who they spring from, has the aspects of all dragons in her. So the ones who go to the icy lands, they begin to express qualities of the snow dragons and the white dragons.
So super tailored evolution with a bonus due to draconic ancestry.
Absolutely. And
cool.
And by the time kobolds are sort of rediscovered by the other humanoid races, they have actually prolifically grown. And
that's what I was actually going to ask. This is what I heard, is they're the most prolific race in D&D, is what I saw. Is that true? Like they're like the most numerous, outnumber everything else, or?
I mean, that's a tough one. You could probably argue, there's a lot of races in D&D. You've got giant centipedes are a race, for God's sakes.
That would be a fascinating census.
Please don't kill me. I'm just checking off how many of you are in the lair.
I could answer by saying that there are many, many more kobolds than we think there are. Because generally, the kobolds that you see and encounter are only encountered and seen because they were the dumb ones that allowed themselves to be encountered and seen.
Yeah, this is
the dumb ones.
This is one of the things that I loved. First off, I wanted to say way back at the beginning, I love you, Rashern, because our second episode, when I picked Behears, it's because John specifically told me I wasn't allowed to do kobolds yet. So I was so happy to get to talk about them. And doing research on them, I just started to love them more because they're fun. They are a lot more fun than the kobolds you see, like, barely managing to fight a level 2 party.
We've mentioned that they're tiny, but how tiny are they?
I saw they've changed throughout time.
To a human size?
No.
Generally between 2 and 3 feet.
Okay.
What I saw was 2 and 3 feet, but then they changed it in like 4th edition to like 3 to 4 feet. But I don't know if they went back to 2 to 3 feet after. Again, I'm going off Wikipedia things, so I might be wrong.
Because it's just again, like my brain scrambles a couple of these races together just because of how they're described. So am I imagining a bunch of ankle biters, or are we talking about small children, or like what are we looking at?
Maybe the best way to understand it is by understanding their layers. Because kobolds use their size to their advantage. So kobold lairs, when you go into one, a normal person is going to have to get down on hands and knees, all fours,
right,
and crawl along just to get into many of these places. And even then, they're going to be pulling themselves along. They're going to be like Winnie the Pooh, stuck in that treehouse. Only there's going to be a bunch of like dragon creatures with spears sticking him up his ass. So that's really like a kobold lair. These things are tiny, but they're not tiny like the way a sprite or a pixie is tiny. They ride giant bats. They ride
weasels, dire weasels.
That's awesome.
Dire weasels, and dire badgers actually too. That's also there.
Oh, nice.
So I would say small child sized. Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's a question that kind of ties in with the size. I don't think we covered it. How smart are they? Because I see like the really cunning traps, and I've also seen that their entire point of like attacking is mobbing. So are they like intelligent, like, all right, we're going to spring a trap on them? Or are they like, just attack and just do things run away?
They're crafty, and their tribal philosophy is make sure the tribe survives above all things. But if you can survive over that guy, it's me before you, but the tribe before everything else. And especially not the gnomes. So there's definitely there's one kobold going, yeah, we're all gonna attack, guys, get those guys. And then he just kind of like scurries to the back away because, it'd be good if all of those adventurers with all their shiny treasure and, tasty flesh would die, but I'm not going to fight them. Not if I can get someone dumber to do it.
What comes to mind when you're explaining that? Have you played Shadow of Mordor?
No, I haven't.
Damn. Okay. There's an orc in that, and that's the personality that I was thinking when you were describing that.
Orcs, kobolds, same thing, right? No.
One other way to answer your question, Rashern, is the book lists them as intelligence 8, which is not very intelligent, but it's not necessarily the right way to think about them either. I think Tyler made a good point when he said that they are crafty. They are very trap smart. And this starts the first time that people really start thinking of kobolds and the true danger of a kobold actually comes about in a I want to say it's a dragon. It is a dragon article. I can't remember.
It's a dragon supplement. Yeah.
It's Tucker's Kobolds in 1987. This is such a good article that I'm actually going to read a brief select, just like a little line from it. Because before this, kobolds were thought of like many horde creatures, which was that they were, expendable. They were great at level, 1 or 2. But after that, they just kind of start to wear out as far as usability goes. And Tucker's Kobolds was written because people were saying, reaching these high levels in Dungeons and Dragons. Dragon 127, that's the article in Dragon 127. People are reaching these high level characters and then realizing like they can kill everything. Like they can kill a lich, they can kill a Tarask. Nothing's really challenging them anymore.
About that.
Well, and keep in mind, this is early D&D before there was a lot of people writing about this because not a lot of people were reaching high level before this. Now people were doing it.
I have a curiosity question that has nothing to do with kobolds, but you just mentioned it. Were Tarasks around since 77?
Tarasks have been around since, I used to know this. Well,
I've gone completely off topic.
We'll just have to wait. We'll just have to, I'm going to look it up and then I'm going to pretend like I knew it in the actual podcast and it'll just flow right off the tongue. Here we go. I'm going to say it again as if none of that has ever happened. Oh, I know the answer to this question. Tarasks appeared in 1983. Yes, nice. 1983 is the first appearance of the Tarask. And this article is written in 1989 for 2nd edition Dungeons and Dragons. So basically, this guy, Roger E. Moore, he writes about, well, has anybody considered that the most terrifying thing for a high-level party could necessarily be these guys? And he describes this encounter that his DM runs where they're in this dungeon to kill like demons. But the experienced like leader of the party and role player, like the very first level of the dungeon, he realizes there's kobolds here. And he's just like, no, we can't handle this. We have to flee. We have to get away. And just to read a selection of this so you get a sense of what it was. When I had joined the gaming group, some of the PCs had already met Tucker, that's the DM, had already met Tucker's kobolds, and they were not eager to repeat the experience. The party leader went over the penciled map of the dungeon and tried to find ways to avoid the little critters, but it was not possible. The group resigned itself to making a run for it through level 1 to get to the elevators where we could get down to level 10 and fight okay monsters like huge flaming demons. It didn't work. The kobolds caught us about 60 feet into the dungeon and locked the door behind us and barred it. Then they set the corridor on fire while we were still in it. And it just keeps going with like thing after thing these kobolds do to this poor party until they finally, like, half of them dead, make it down to go fight these demons. It's amazing. And it really changed the way that people thought about what kobolds can do. And to this day, they are primarily best used as trap monsters and really can challenge any level of party.
That was such a revelation when I was researching them. Like, I was like, oh, almost every kobold encounter I've ever had has been entirely wrong, because it's always been goblins light. They're weaker, but there's more of them. And it's like, oh, really? I was fighting the dumb kobolds.
Well, and the neural net has a good thing to say about this as well. When I asked it about it,
Dumb kobolds?
kobolds are like little dragons on steroids and are actually not all that bad. These guys, they can survive magic, melee attacks, and can survive outside in snow and water. These guys are truly hardcore. They don't die, even if you stab them through the eye or something. They can sense your presence and will fling themselves in any direction unless they know you can't get into their eyes or their lungs, whatever.
What?
We actually had a kobold on our party once. Me and Tyler.
Oh, is it time to talk about many treasures?
Should we tell the story? We should check with the chat first. Are there any questions or
No,
things that have come
everyone's
up?
just been enjoying the lore.
Okay. Do you have anything more related, real quick, that before we jump on this tangent, Rashern?
No, other than they lay eggs.
Yes, they are an egg-laying
yes,
race.
procreation.
Kobold sex.
No.
It's actually, I don't know. I found it.
I'm sorry.
It's an
The way you
interesting-
said that, Charlie, you're like, well, actually.
Actually, I found it quite beautiful.
Well, it's
Caboitus is what they call it. Caboitus.
kobolds breed to fill a space as quickly as they can. So every kobold lair is every area that a kobold tribe exists is always overcrowded with kobolds
Because of all the sex.
because of all the sex. And so there's no nudity taboos. There's no, they mate for procreation, kind of based on the needs of the tribe. Like, oh, we don't have enough trap makers, and that lady's really good at making traps, so let's
Get busy.
let's make some more trap kobolds.
Did we talk about during your opening, like the history that how long did they live? I saw 135 years. They're incredibly long lived.
So most kobolds live to be about 20 because of the dangers of being a kobold.
Right.
A kobold.
That's correct. But they can live up to about 135 years. And it's kind of telling of how unforgiving, kobolds are, or how kobolds are impressed by dragons. That's about it. Dragons and otherwise they're surprisingly unmoved by things. And I love this. You're not labeled an elder until you reach about 120. So then you got maybe if you're in your last 5 good years of
You
life.
can be an elder.
Good years.
Oh,
In big quotes there. Barnaby asks, do they have single eggs or clutches?
I believe it was clutches.
They lay up to 6. They lay up
Yeah.
to 6 per. One female will lay up to 6 per year. And I think it is. They actually. There's a word for this. It's ovo. People love it when I pronounce things.
Mm-hmm,
Ovoviviparous. I think I actually got that. Ovoviviparous, which means they carry the eggs inside of them for a time before they lay them. So they actually partially develop inside the kobold's body.
Okay.
did we talk about sunlight?
I mean, I talk about sunlight all the time. And I mean, I love sunlight.
I meant with kobolds. I just read that they didn't like it.
I mean, they do live in caves.
They actually get a penalty.
That was actually only added in 5th edition, which
Yeah.
is really,
really?
interesting. Yeah.
It
Really?
was definitely they don't like the sun, but it wasn't a built-in mechanical.
Like, it wasn't as bad as the drow with their sun aversion. It was just they don't like it.
Yeah.
And now it's a
Well, I think again,
Sunlight.
it goes back to what we were saying at the very beginning, which is that it's so interesting to me. I don't think we've had a creature like this that was so iconic and yet so underdeveloped. It's really, I thought like you, Rashern, you said you picked these because it's the most basic of D&D monsters. Yeah. And I was like, oh, there's going to be so much lore and history and changes to get through and to mark and to say, okay, well, first they went this direction, that direction. No, there was nothing really until 5th edition has the most information on these guys. There
was a solid 20 years where it was just Roger Moore like, I like kobolds and I think everybody else should like kobolds because they're terrifying.
Yeah, Tucker scared me once.
Was like, no, they're goblins light.
Roger Moore was a creator of D&D and not Bond.
Yeah, well, not Roger Moore, either the creator of D&D or Bond, but he was a writer for D&D, and I don't think it's the same Roger Moore.
No, I know it's probably not. I was just making a dumb joke.
In a way, by the time he'd finished making Bond, he was a wise old one too. But I mean, from what I can tell, the kobolds, I mean, there's not much writing until 5th edition, except about that they do enjoy sex. That's written about because, of course, it's important.
I mean, clearly there's an overpopulation problem, so gotta happen somehow.
I think the further they moved from mammalian goblinoid creature, the more comfortable people were writing about them having sex. Just like somehow it was more like, they're like, oh, okay, well, now it's birds. So we're okay with that. Cloacas. We started this podcast with cloacas, and by God, we will end it one day with cloacas. I guess we should get on to our story, Tyler. All right, so I guess we'll tell this story together, but I'll lay the groundwork, which was Tyler and I played a campaign. If anybody's played Pathfinder, it was the Kingmaker campaign. And our DM, Andy, who I think we've mentioned before, has, he foolishly, I'm going to say foolishly, allowed us to play as evil characters. It was me, Tyler, Kayvon. We were evil characters. And so rather than really king making, we really went around just kind of blowing up the countryside. Do you want to describe who the characters were, Tyler?
So it was a group of, you all played tieflings.
We were all brothers. And I was the sister.
You were the sister. And I was a half orc, and I was by far the least evil of everybody.
He was also the step brother. I was the
step brother. Yeah.
We didn't like him.
John was by far the most evil of characters.
She was insane.
Yeah.
She was just, and I mean, insane to things I probably can't even talk about on the show.
I wouldn't recommend it.
No, they're that bad. They're that bad. I mean, things involving
John decided to play evil, no filters.
Okay.
It was. I'm going to let your imagination run wild with it and just say yes. So, but along our journeys, we found and murdered, I should say, a group of kobolds. But one of them. We decided to keep alive.
Because we need to find the lair of the kobolds. And he promises us many treasures. I give you many treasures. So we decide, well, we're evil. Why don't we just make a deal with these kobolds and, plan to have them overrun the humans when we decide to destroy this village that we're scamming? So we go
Definitely an evil campaign.
To the kobold lair and find out that the king of this tribe of kobolds does not like our many treasures because of his constant attempts to give the kobold princess a raspberry twist.
Oh,
which we later found out he didn't even know what that meant, but he felt it was something vaguely sexual and good, and had no idea what he was doing. And so we took him under our wing, our very, very evil, dark, horrendous, broken wing. And from there, he just joined us and was probably one of the best NPCs we've ever had.
He's one of the most memorable NPCs he was my in-game best friend. He was my little buddy, me and Many Treasures going out and, well, obviously not solving crimes, but
causing them.
So my character played a big role in what happened next, which was we were in a big fight, and my character had an ability, but basically just hurt everything around her, friends, foes. She didn't care. And it was sort of this necrotic thing. So she wades into combat, and Tyler and Many Treasures are there, and she just unleashes this blast of pure evil energy, and it knocks out Tyler, and the kobold Many Treasures is killed in the blast.
And then what happened to Many Treasures?
Well, so then everybody's trying to decide, like, how do we tell Tyler?
We murdered your friend.
And my character's like, well, again, playing very evil. I'm like, well, we don't tell him. We just cook him. And then when he wakes up, he's going to be hungry. So we'll feed it to him. So Tyler wakes up. He is blind at this point. And he's asking about Many Treasures. And we're like, don't worry about it. You're very sick. This will cure your blindness. And we fed him piece by piece.
Oh,
Many
no,
treasures.
you guys were like, oh, the fairy lady, she murdered him.
That's right. We first convinced him that somebody else had done the deed. I think I eventually told you in your moment of greatest like weakness.
I think it was right before the TPK. Like, as I was dying, you were like, I killed Many Treasures. And you ate him.
This will make you feel better in your death.
In any case, that is our...
He's always been with you.
That is our long-winded but very memorable character story. The life and death of Many Treasures.
Talking to potential new DMs, how would you recommend that they play with their kobolds? Lean more towards the modern trap aspect, or keep them as kind of the cannon fodder monster?
I would say it depends on the scenario, because in any war party of kobolds, there is a clutch of not very bright kobolds
Raspberry twist
that have been encouraged to be, a little more aggressive. Just go out there, just fight them. You can take them. You're scrappy. You're young. You're not very bright, but don't worry about that. You'll get them. So that the smarter, the more clever kobolds will be able to get the fuck out and plant their traps. I definitely, when next I DM and use kobolds, it will be as trappers. I loved the lore that I learned about them, researching them. Just like, it's so interesting. Like, their highest tier craftsman is the guy that makes the best traps. When you commit a crime in kobold society, the way that they execute you is you have to pass through 3 untested traps. And if you can survive 3 untested traps, not only are you granted reprieve, but you are considered a hero, because you've done such a good service. You field tested these traps for us, and you didn't die.
And another example of that kind of ritual is I think it's your 2nd year of age, you are subjected to the, what is it called? The ritual of the pit, the breaking of the pit. And this ritual is, you are brought by the tribe's priest to a great or a small pit. It kind of varies depending
just
on
a pit.
It could be literally a hole, just like a hole in front of you in the ground, or it could be a vast chasm filled with lava. And in any case, your goal is to make it across the pit. And it doesn't really matter how you do it or how long it takes you. It's just, when you get across the pit, if you're not dead, then you're alive and in the tribe. Otherwise, you're dead and you're not in the tribe, obviously.
This is 2 years of age, like 2 years old.
Yeah, this is 2 years old. So
you gotta hope this is the year that they had crap rain and they got lazy and barely dug like a puddle. And you're like, I'm in.
Well, and the article does mention, this is from the ecology article, and it does mention in a kind of hilarious note, it's like, oddly enough, when the tribe is running short on warriors, a lot of people seem to pass the trial of the pit and become warriors. It's like, the kobold tribe, like, becomes more selective the more members there are, and are, as Tyler said earlier, it's me over you, the tribe overall, and then but everything's dropped when we hate because we hate gnomes.
And
That kind of
also, especially, fuck the gnomes.
Fuck the gnomes,
Fuck
and
the
also
gnomes.
and also sex. Let's have some sex. Like that's we need some more eggs. But
I give you raspberry twist.
But I totally agree with Tyler. I think this is a great. I think the Kobolds is one of those wonderful examples that we're just coming across more and more. I think as we do more of the bestiary, of where the stats on the paper that can really hold you back. And that's my advice for DMs. Is if it's very easy, especially as a first time DM, to pull open the monster manual and look for like, okay, well, my characters are my character's level 10. So I need a CR 10 creature or like 5 level 5 creatures, or, you're just looking at that CR and you're flipping through and you're going, well, Kobolds, CR 1/8. What the heck am I going to do with that? Oh my God, their leaders are only CR 2. How did these things make it in the world? And flip on. And what's wonderful about Volo's guide is that it takes so many different creatures, and Kobolds are amongst them, and says, look, let's throw away the CR. Like, forget the CR. Here's why people are afraid to fight these things. Here's what they do well. And you start thinking outside of, okay, it takes 37 CR 1/8 Kobolds to take down a level 3 character. And you start thinking in terms of like, okay, the players go into a cave that, following a clue that they gathered in the city, and they have no idea Kobolds are here. And suddenly they're entering, without knowing it, just a hellish maze of all their worst fears and no way out. Literally the passage collapsing behind them, cutting the party off. Their hirelings completely gone. Nobody knows where they are, and thus begins the party having to survive for 7 days without food or water in this trap-riddled cave where they don't get long rests because they can't rest for a moment before the kobolds show up and wake them. I mean, you can just see how this can snowball.
You
and snowball.
thought this was a regular level 8 encounter, but instead it's the descent.
Yeah, it's the descent. And that's what could make these guys really fun. And I think with you don't have to sit down and write an entire dungeon. This is another mistake I think a lot of DMs make. I've made it myself, where I'm like, I don't want to run a kobold scenario because, oh my God, I'm gonna have to come up with a dungeon worthy of the kobolds. No, just map out some traps, map out just those things, and kind of maybe even let the players tell the story a little bit. Give some of the narrative control over to them. Say, hey, what do you find next? What do you come across next? And then, but what you control is the traps. And let your inner Gygax fly. Think to yourself, what's the most evil thing I could put my party through? And then have the kobolds put them through it. And if you want to take it back to numbers, traps have whatever CR and damage and all that you give them. So you don't have to worry about, okay, well, it's going to take, I can only build level 1 traps for these level 10 characters. No, you get to decide.
So we've got a great question from Mamba. His question is that if we picked a kobold character to play, what class would we play in an adventuring party? Like if we were like a kobold adventuring party, what would we play as? And then name them? No.
But mine is named Daryl McCraney.
Morgan, I know you like to have time to think on these things, right?
I can't do names, man. I can't do names at the drop of a hat. You know me.
Can you at least do class? Can you do class?
Yeah, I could probably do class, but I'll go like, because I have 2 options that I was thinking based on our discussion. Like, I mean, the obvious is gonna be a rogue type class because you're gonna be doing the trap stuff. Or like a forge cleric, maybe, if you're doing trap stuff. Would that work too?
Forge cleric, I think, would work.
Or sorcerer, like that. We're gonna go crazy magic and just like blow things up because that would be fun.
I love it. Well, let's roll for yours. Does somebody have a couple dice out? Who has dice?
What are we rolling? A D20 or a D100?
We're gonna name your kobold last. So let's start with its color.
Yes.
So
Okay.
roll a die 100.
They're buried.
Well, I don't have 100, but I can roll 5d20s.
Oh, my
No,
lord.
no.
Oh, my lord.
No. Hang on.
No,
Hang on.
19,
roll
No.
two d10s. 2d10s.
2d10s.
Yeah, the first one is your tens digit.
Oh, I have 100. I have 100. I apologize.
Okay, go for it.
54.
54. Well, Morganite, your sorcerer kobold
Okay.
is orange brown in color,
Okay.
and in its name, roll die 20.
Well, she's orange brown. Can I go with pumpernickel?
Oh no, I love it. Yeah, pumpernickel, and we'll add Galax at the end of that. Pumpernickel Galax.
Pumpernickel Galax.
Pumpernickel Galax.
The sorcerer.
The sorcerer. It sounds like a sorcerer name, I will say.
Yep.
Tyler?
I think I would go. There's a subtype of ranger that's specifically trap oriented, right?
Now there is.
Yeah.
We'll say there is.
Sure.
I swear there's one floating around somewhere that's just
Yeah,
all
probably.
traps all the time. And it would be that type of ranger, and it would be Daryl McCraney, Lord of the Kobolds.
Let's do a die
he have a
100 for your
cowboy
color.
hat?
Let's do a die 100 for his color.
All right.
Yep.
And my D100. Oh.
You are a gray kobold. I like this. A little gray kobold.
Blends in.
Daryl McCraney running around. I like to think you also have a mustache, and
Oh, yes.
and maybe a dapper accent.
Oh, yes.
So, I do say that. That trap you've built there, sir. I think the quality is nigh high. I love it. It makes me want to have coitus.
He'd be one of those, refined Waterdeep kobolds.
Actually, before I go on to mine, I do have to talk about these Waterdeep kobolds. This is an interesting segue. We talked earlier about how like kobolds, you don't see them and all this. One of my favorite stories, I think it came out of Volo's Guide, is that kobolds are brought into the service of some cities, and they'll be used to do things like dig sewers and expand the sewer system. And these kobolds, because they're kind of living in tandem and they're getting what they need from the city, they will keep themselves hidden and just sort of work to the good of the city, continuing to just on their own dig the sewers and maintain them and all of the sorts of stuff like that. And the people above won't even know they're there. And Waterdeep is one of those cities where this happens. And there's like these, and because of this, there's these like rumors of like kobold sightings. Like, I saw a kobold over in, the northern corner.
That's silly. Yeah.
And yeah, exactly. People are like, no, you were just drunk. I was with you, and there was no kobold, And it's true. Like they just kind of hide under the city. It's just a cool little. I love that little touch of these are, because it fleshes out the world. These are how the creatures actually get along in this world. Rashern, do you want to go next, or should I?
Sure. I was named by a human, Tiny Smitherson. I'd be a rogue with the traps. And I know it's not quite like them, but I want to think I have a little slingshot.
Oh, no, that's totally.
They're all about slingshots. Yeah.
I'd like to think I had a little slingshot.
I like to think that instead of launching rocks, you launch poisonous beetles at people.
Yes. Tiny Smitherson? I don't know. That's the best I can come up with.
No, it's good. Tiny Smitherson is right up there with Daryl McCraney.
Daryl McCraney carries around jars of bees.
Jars of bees.
You are brown. You are basic brown.
Yay.
My kobold is from the icy north. He's a snow kobold. We'll make it a she. She's a snow
No barbarians?
Kobold.
You have your
Oh no,
angry.
she's totally a barbarian.
Oh,
She's
fantastic.
absolutely a barbarian from the frozen north. And she's come into the hotter lands, these southern lands, to learn the ways of the other kobolds so that she might take their stories back to her tribe. What she doesn't know is that the tribe actually just told her to go on this mission because they're hoping she'll die. But she doesn't know that. She thinks like she's a hero of the tribe and she's gonna make it back to them. And her name is Momrat. She's a reddish brown, and because she's reddish brown, she's convinced that she's a distant relation of Tiny over here. And it's just that's all, like, most of her time is spent hanging around you, Tiny, just trying to bond.
We're cousins.
Yeah,
All right. Yes, sir.
I think we'd be brothers and sisters. I'm the sister. Although that actually that can actually change. They can kobolds.
Are they like
change.
frogs?
They can like frogs. They can change their gender.
Shit. Okay. That's cool.
And they don't even do it if there's just like a bunch of males and a bunch of females. They just do it if, like, you know,
they want.
Not if they want so much, but if kind of like if there's, you know, if they think there's a need. Like, they're like, you know what? There's not enough females doing their work for this egg clutch lay, and so I'm gonna join in. I'm not gonna tell them to get busy. I'm gonna bro up and sis up and come forward, and I'm gonna help out. I'm gonna help the cause. Because
they're very much like, there's no gender imbalance in
very progressive little guys.
Like work or anything. You know, everything is very communal. So, you know, the top of the trap makers, it doesn't matter, you know, man or woman. The chieftain is just the oldest person.
Right. So, I mean, that would make sense if you can just spontaneously, then yeah, it would be a lot more progressive society, because you at any moment could be the other gender. And so why would you treat them any different? Man, that would be such a great thing for humanity.
There were two other things I wanted to cover because I think they're really important to kobolds. One is I know we've talked a little bit about, obviously they're dragons and they have this connection to Tiamat, but I don't think we've really impressed upon, like, kobold society is very often based around either a need, like a purpose, or it's based around a powerful figure, I should say. And so this is why you'll see kobolds either, like, they'll be the sewer diggers for Waterdeep, or they'll be miners in a particular mine, or they'll be kind of the servants to, you know, a dragon, generally. Some kind of, they seek out dragons and seek to become their servants. By nature, kobolds are lawful. They're not evil by nature. They're lawful. They're very, very anti-chaotic. So they're extremely
lawful, evil, or lawful good, depending, but they're lawful.
They tend towards the chromatic dragons, which are evil. And they do that because those dragons seem to share sort of their they struggle a little bit with the idea of, like, doing good for others, because as Tyler has told us, they have that particular mindset.
Yeah. They have a pretty high level of disdain for the other races, and then of course the gnomes they fucking hate.
But it's interesting that, you know, depending on what dragon they're in service to, they could gain more draconic powers, like fire breath. You know, even though this isn't written specifically in the book, it is something that it does say, hey, you know, they take on the traits and the desires and some of the aspects of these dragons. So I think if you wanted to give Rashern one of your kobolds like fire breath, have him be in service of a red dragon, you know, and just have that kind of be their trait that they pick up. If you want them to maybe be a little bit like, maybe their skin exudes poison, then they are in the service of a green dragon, you know, and that again can change the traps they use and the layers and all of this stuff. So I wanted to mention that because it's a really good source of, it says a lot while saying very little, you know. Kobolds.
So even if you have a kobold expert about the kobolds that they're locally familiar with, if they travel like to 4 towns over, they'll be like, wait, what? My kobolds couldn't do this. What the heck?
And it's also a really easy way if you're a DM who wants to create a good kobold like scenario or campaign or dungeon. It could be more inspiration for you. You know, if you're really having trouble thinking up like, okay, what kind of traps do these guys use? What kind of like attitudes would they have? What would their lure look like? Go look up a blue dragon and be like, oh, okay. So it would, or like a black dragon and say, oh, okay. So they're going to be in a swamp and there's going to be, you know, their traps are going to be filled with like disease oriented stuff and things like that. So you can draw a lot of inspiration from that.
I liked one small thing that I liked is their clerics. The clerics of Kurtlemock are called the Eyes of Kurtlemock because he was imprisoned. He was trapped by Garl Glittergold. So they're like searching for him. That's the like the purpose for kobolds is like, you know, we want to bring back Kurtlemock so he can lead us to the true civilization of kobolds. And they don't have a lot of like religious rites or anything, but they pray daily because Kurtlemock will intercede all the time. He's always sending out aspects of himself to like help war bands or lead new mining projects or help inspire new traps. Like he's a very hands-on god for the kobolds.
And I did remember what I was going to bring up, and it is a good closing point, which is it's a sign. I mean, we see them in just how much kobolds have grown to fill other fantasy realms. Like I can remember them in Final Fantasy games. I know they're in World of Warcraft, and they're much more like their old counterparts. They have like candles on their heads. I mean, in old mythology, kobolds were especially known to like light candles or melt candles. So this kind of comes back literally in World of Warcraft. I don't know, Rashern, if you've got but you know, I mean, you could probably think of other games that they're in.
Dwarf Fortress.
No, yeah, there you go. There you go. But you do see them pop up all over the place, and they're now a very common monster. And it's just interesting to think that prior to them showing up in Dungeons and Dragons, they were literally a kind of known mythology from the 13th century, really, and not even that well known of one, as evidenced by how much trouble we had researching them, their old mythology. And now they're everywhere. So it's just kind of, again, it's a sense of like, of all the sex they're having, for one, but of also there's the Dungeons and Dragons, like how much that influenced the other games in this genre. And I mean, that this creature, I mean, it wouldn't have taken off in this way. It was not a well-known mythological creature.
We didn't mention it. I'm assuming they can speak like Common or English or whatever language D&D uses as their main.
Their primary languages are Common, Undercommon, and a language called Yip Yak.
I forgot about Yip Yak.
Which is a dialect of Draconic that better fits their tone of voice, which is a like yapping sound, kind of like a small dog. So a Yip Yak, you know, that it's named that because that's what it sounds like to the untrained ear. And I wanted to say, like, this, you know, earlier episodes, I have definitely been the guy who rails against the 5e Monster Manual as like, oh, look at all these amazing things that we had in the past, and now we've got like CR3 giant spider. That's what you got. Deal with it. It's nice to finally see a creature that's like, you know what, we're gonna keep it, we're gonna make it bigger. I love that.
Did we talk about what they eat?
Everything.
These are creatures that will literally, like, you know, you've heard of people getting starving and chewing on boot leather because it has like some trace amount of protein in it. Kobolds are just, they don't even need to be starving. They'll just eat the boot leather. It's fine. I mean, now there is some really interesting things about their eating. Like, they will cannibalize their own kind. Generally not kill them and eat them, but if they die, they will eat them, partially to remove any evidence of their presence.
Oh, okay.
And that's the main reason they'll eat their own kin. They will also, I mean, if they're starving, they'll do it, but mostly it's just to keep themselves hidden, or they'll use their kin. Like if their kin died of disease, they'll use it as a trap. They'll eat humans. They'll eat, there's really nothing they don't eat. There's one thing they're terrified of. And I thought this was just really funny. They're scared of bears. They're really scared
Really?
of bears. Yeah, I don't know if it's because they live in caves, and so do bears, and bears just don't have, I don't know, bears are just big and lumbering and I mean, bears are kind of like their Tarasques, maybe. But it does mention this. I can't.
Of all things,
it's bears. Bears. They're really scared of bears. So
weird.
One thing we probably won't touch too much on this episode is that they have a long-standing war with a lot of the other metahuman races. So like the orcs, the ogres, but especially goblins, because they are similar size. They tend to try to live in the same areas, and they sort of have differing traits. Goblins are not trap. I mean, goblins use traps too, but they're more crude, and goblins are more about just swarming enemies, and and kobolds, despite their numbers, are more about tricking enemies and leaving no sign of their presence. And the two really, really hate each other. And there's actually been entire, just like we have like human versus orc like histories on the surface, in the underground, the underworld, you have entire histories of goblin and kobold wars going on. And I actually asked the neural net about this. I told it. I just said straight up, I said, kobolds don't like goblins. And it said, well, dungeon mobs don't like you.
Harsh.
Ouch.
Well, on that note, I think that's a good place to wrap up. So
thank you guys for having me.
Yes, thank you so much, Rashern, for joining us and for picking kobolds. I know Tyler was very excited about getting a chance to talk about them. We'll if you want to catch up on our upcoming stuff, please check us out on our Twitter and our website at alignmentmayvary.com, where all of our backlog episodes are stored and housed at. We also have a YouTube channel, which is slowly getting uploaded, all of the past episodes as well. But yeah, alignmentmayvary.com, and check out our Patreon. I lost my voice.
Our Patreon is so great that it literally takes Morgan's breath away.
I am very excited about that. Wow, I'm sorry.
If you donate now, Morgan will get her voice back. If you don't donate, then she's just going to stay like this forever. So if every dollar helps Morgan. We use them mostly for cough drops. That's mostly what we use them for. Ricola has gotten more expensive these days, but every dollar helps. Every dollar helps. I will also throw in that if you join us next time, we are doing the Slod, which is a very strange otherworldly creature.
Totally thought you were going to say sloth.
Which is also a strange otherworldly creature. And that'll be, we'll be joined there by the creator of the RPG Hammer Crawl. So hope you can join us for that.
That's super exciting. I can talk again. I don't know what happened.
Somebody must have donated.
I know. All right, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
See you. You might not hear us, but we'll see you.
Bye, everybody.